it's Vanessa the Crafty Gemini, and in this video tutorial I'm going to teach you how to get perfect patchwork points using gridded interfacing to make some fun patchwork oven mitts. So here's the heads up. This project does require some specialty products, but no worries because I always include links for you in the description box below this video. Click on it, it'll open up, you'll see links there on where you can find all the materials and supplies that I'm using in this video tutorial. Now, if you're new to my channel and you like what you see, you enjoy my teaching style, give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on my future videos. Now let's go over the supplies we'll need so we can jump right into making our project. For a nice scrappy look, I suggest 5 to 8 different fabrics to get a good variety. Then we'll be using 2.5-inch lightweight gridded fusible interfacing. Also insulated batting or fleece. Make sure that the packaging says that it's good for oven mitts and pot holders and things like that. And then we'll also be using 100% cotton batting. Aside from that, a working sewing machine, an iron and ironing board, and of course something to mark, measure, and cut your fabrics with. For this project, I've provided you with a free downloadable template that we're going to use to create the quilted oven mitt. Now, you'll find the link in the description box below this video or by clicking the lowercase letter I that you see on the top right-hand corner of the video. That will take you over to my website with the information on how you can download the free pattern template. When you print the template out, make sure that you're printing it out so that your printer settings are set to 100%. The key thing is I've included this 1-inch by 1-inch square here, so when you're printing it out, in order for you to know that it's printed at scale and exactly the size that I designed it to be, you want to measure this little box. So it's 1 inch by 1 inch, and if it measures that, then you know you printed it correctly. Once you cut out your template, just set it aside. Now let's gather the fabrics that we're going to use to create the quilted panel here for the top of our oven mitt. I recommend having more fabrics versus less. That way you get a scrappier look and it's made up of more fun colors and prints, something like this. So you're going to need 4 squares by 5. So we'll need a total of 20 squares that measure 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Press your fabrics and cut a variety of squares to that size. Let's set all of these aside and work with the interfacing that's going to give us our perfect grid. Now the gridded interfacing we'll be working with comes as a really big piece. It's 3 feet by 4 feet, so you'll be able to make several of these with the same gridded interfacing. And what this is going to do is help us get perfect patchwork without all the work that goes into it. So if you've sewn 2.5-inch squares together before, I'll give you a quick example. The way that it would work is that you take one square, you put one next to it, you put another one here, and then you would sew one by one. So this guy would come here, you sew it, you press it open, then add the next one, and you'd continue to do that to end up with whatever size grid panel you need to make. For this project, we need 20, so we need 4 squares across by 5 squares down. If you don't sew consistent seam allowances or your cutting is a little bit off, it's going to be really tricky to get really nice points and intersections where each one of the squares meet the other. So you can see this little 4x4 grid was done. All the points match up perfectly, and I didn't have to struggle with each individual square because the interfacing is going to do that work for us. So let me show you how it works. So this is the interfacing I like to use, and we sell this in our online shop. Of course, I'll include a link for you in the description box below if you want to get some to give it a try. So what I typically do is cut it down, and then from there, cut out the grid that I need based on the project. So for this one, I said we'll need 4 squares across by 5 down. Now, a few things about this interfacing. You can see how lightweight and sheer it is. One side feels a little bit scratchy because it has very tiny dots of adhesive, which is what's going to fuse the fabric in place. And then the other side, it's like a really super fine lightweight interfacing. And so what this is basically a lightweight, fusible, non-woven interfacing with a pre-printed panel of 2.5-inch squares. We'll place the interfacing here, and it's a little bit tricky to see, but I think you can see the gridded, the pre-printed panel with the dashed lines on it. So I'm placing it on my ironing board with the scratchy side face up because we're going to layer our fabric on top of it, and that way the adhesive will get fused to the wrong side of the fabric. Now you play a little design game and place your 2.5-inch squares wherever you want them to create the design that you'd like to be for this panel. once your desired layout is done, take an iron and just press them. Make sure you don't swipe because you may move the squares and you don't want to mess up the grid. And this is a really lightweight interfacing, so you don't have to hold it there for a very long time. Now the grid is complete. You can see it's fused into place and our squares fit within the grid marks perfectly. Now we're going to head over to the sewing machine so we can sew these together exactly where they're at. Now the key with this is to go in rows in the same direction. So parallel rows first and work your way across the whole grid, and then we'll turn it and we'll sew in the opposite direction. So you're sewing these seams. So we know that we place fabrics pretty sides touching, so that means we're going to fold this entire row over this guy, and then we're going to use this fold line here as the edge of our fabric and sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance down the entire strip. So we're sewing these 2 rows of 5 squares each together in one simple seam. It comes together ridiculously fast, and you'll see you'll end up with perfect intersections every single time. So we're going to come here, sew this one, then we'll flip over and come to the next row and sew here, and then finally the last one here and do the exact same thing. All right, we sewed those 3 long vertical seams. Now we'll come over to the iron and press. And now we're going to come in and stitch the other way. So this one, here, and then one more that way. But there's one thing we need to do before we go back and sew. So grab yourself some sharp little scissors. So what we need to do is come in here and we're going to snip on the dashed lines of where the blocks meet. So right here is a seam, and I'm going to snip right up to the stitch line. See how I separated that? So now you'll see when I snip each one, now I need to sew this seam. So these guys need to come here, and look. Now there's more give there because I snipped every single one of these seams. So now it'll lie flat for you. Does that make sense? So you need to come in. If this is the next one we need to sew, we need to snip here, here, and here. So let's do that. And you're going to want to snip each one of these for all these rows so you can go back and just sew in one sitting. Now we'll come in and stitch the seams in the opposite direction. So this one here, you see how it lies flat for me because I eased up the bulk there? And do the exact same thing. You don't even have to try and match up anything. The interfacing is working for you. Everything is fused in place, and they're going to be perfect points. Beautiful points right there. Now let's work our way across and repeat to the remaining seams. Ta-da! Isn't that a beautiful, perfect patchwork grid? Without having to sew each one individually, it comes together super quickly, and now we're ready to move on. So we're going to set this aside, grab your rotary cutter and your quilted oven mitt template. You're going to place this on top here, and we're going to cut all the way around it first. So one thing to note is that down here I have a little thing that says add 2 inches. We're going to do that next, and we're actually going to add a 2.5 inch strip here, but don't worry about that yet. Now I'm going to swing around here, and this part I'm going to do by hand. So I'll show you how we do that in a minute. But for right now, let's just cut everywhere else that's a little bit easier to get into. So now for cutting in here, it's going to be a little bit tricky, and what you're going to want to tend to do is kind of do like this sharp triangular portion that goes right in here. And you don't want to do that because that's not going to give you a nice turned out curve right here where the thumb meets the hand part of it. So instead, I like to just draw it in. And it's okay if you even go a little bit further in than this when you go to cut it by hand. So I'm just going to trace out the template roughly. And you'll see I'll come in here and give yourself a little bit bigger of a curve. The more space you give yourself in there, it'll be easier to sew it through all the layers when we move on with the other steps. So you want to end up with something like this. Not a sharp point, but something a little bit curvier that you can work around. Now for this little cuff portion here, choose whatever fabric you want to use for that and cut it out so it measures 2.5 inches by 7 inches across. Then we'll take the cuff piece, place it on top of the gridded panel here, pretty sides touching, and go back to the sewing machine to sew these together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once that's sewn in press, trim it so that it matches and is flush with the side of the oven mitt panel. Now this is going to be our template, okay, to cut out the remaining pieces of our lining fabrics, of the other side of the oven mitt here, and then also of the lining pieces, the cotton batting, and the insulated batting. So there's something very important that you need to keep in mind before you start cutting into these things, and that is that you need to cut out mirror image pieces. So let me give you an example. These two were cut mirror image, and what that means is that I had the fabric folded, pretty sides touching, and then I use this as my template to cut around and cut to. So this is going to be my lining. Now look what happens. Because they were cut with pretty sides touching, I have mirror image, which is what you need to have. So if these are lining pieces and this one is here, this one is going to go like this. So they need to match up, so the pretty sides of them are mirror image. And that probably still doesn't make sense, but I'll give you an example of what would happen if you cut two with the fabric face up. So here are two of the same. They're identical in size, but what happens when I go to sew these together with pretty sides touching? I put pretty sides together and they don't match. So this is not going to work. Does that make sense? So you need to cut them out so that when they are pretty sides touching, they match up like these two were. Here's another tip. On the finished oven mitt, I've designed it, because I am right-handed, for the gridded panel to be on top. Because it's a non-woven interfacing that we use to create the grid, I don't necessarily want to have it where the hottest part of the grabbing of the oven mitt is going to be. So instead, here we use one solid panel. We're still going to use this to cut this panel out, but the gridded one, you want it to be on the top side of your hand. So if you're left-handed, this is not going to work, right? So what you're going to do is, instead of cutting out the template like we did face up here, or this will also come into play if you're making two oven mitts, one for each hand, you'll want to cut one of the quilted gridded panel this way, and the other, you'll want to cut it out of the gridded panel this way. So say this was big enough, instead of cutting it like this, face up with the template, I would cut it like this, so you can end up with the opposite side hand of this. I hope that makes sense, and I think once you start making it, you'll start to see, and after maybe a few miscuts, you'll start to realize what it is that I'm saying. So for the right-handed one, we cut it with the template face up. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to use this one to cut whatever fabric I'm going to use down here. So let me grab that and show you how to orient it for cutting. I want to use this fabric for what is going to be the bottom side, where the grabbing is going to take place, okay? So we lay the fabric pretty side facing up, and I take my right-handed gridded template here that we've made and flip it so that these two are then going to match up. Because if they're pretty sides touching, I know they'll match up in size, and I can then sew around them in the final construction step of this. So place it there. You can put pins if you want to. You guys know I love to wing everything. And again, I'm just going to go from here to up here. So this little section, since it's a little tight, I'll go back and cut it with scissors by hand. Great, so we have our two exterior pieces and they were cut mirror image. So let's set these aside, or you can just grab one actually, because we're going to use it as our template. Now let's cut the lining fabric that's going to be on the inside of the finished mitt. So these two fabrics here. So we're going to take the fabric we want to use for that, and we're going to fold it so that the pretty sides are touching. That's going to give us the mirror image pieces that we need. Then we'll take this template and place it on top. And then we'll cut through both layers, following around the edges so they're all the same size. Now you have your two lining pieces, so set those aside. And now let's grab our 100% cotton batting and the insulated batting as well. Now oven mitts can be a little bulky to sew through, so the way I do it is that this top section, since there won't be any heat touching here, I just cut out one layer of the 100% cotton batting for this top section. For the bottom one here, which is where the heat will be, I like to cut both. one layer of 100% cotton batting, and a piece of my insulated batting as well. So let's grab our template here and use it to cut those pieces. Now for this top panel, you want to adhere this gridded panel to the cotton batting. So you can do it in a variety of ways. You can quilt it if you want to. I'm going to use some temporary spray adhesive just to kind of keep these guys together. Or you can also base stitch right around the outer edge, about 1/8 of an inch in from the edges. This top panel is done with the one piece of batting. Now grab what's going to be the other side of it. Remember, the bottom side right here. So this is where the heat is going to be. So let's use this to cut one of the cotton batting and one of the insulated batting. That's one. And now we'll cut the same thing out of the insulated batting. Now, depending on the insulated batting that you're using, you'll have to read the manufacturer's instructions to see if there's a specific way that it needs to be oriented, whether it's the shinier side or a more matte side that looks more like a fleecy side. So for mine that I'm using here, you can see that this side is shinier. So this is the side that I want to be furthest out in my oven mitt, because the reflective part that's shiny is what's going to reflect the heat back onto its source. So let's walk through the why, right? So this is going to be shiny. And if the shiny side is here, it's going to be reflecting the heat back to whatever hot thing you're touching, the source. So in the case of a shinier insulated batting that has the shiny side and a more matte side, I want the shiny side to be touching the wrong side of the fabric. That way I know that the shiny portion is going to be facing towards the heat source, if that makes sense. Now, some of the products that you find out there for insulated batting don't have a shinier side. Like this one, it looks the same on both sides, and so you may find that the manufacturer's instructions will say it doesn't matter which side goes where. So if that's the case for the insulated batting that you're using, then it won't matter which one is touching the wrong side of the fabric that's going to go on the underside here of your oven mitt. Now there are a lot of pieces that have to be cut mirror image, so let's do an overview of what we should have. You should have the top part of your oven mitt, okay? That's been cut also with a matching piece of cotton batting, 100% cotton batting. Then we have what's going to be the underside of the oven mitt, right here. Okay, see how this is going to come together? And this one has been cut with two different battings. So we have one that we cut from just the 100% cotton batting with that piece, and then also the insulated one. Now, because we're going to layer two different types of battings on this panel, I want you to line up the insulated one closest to here. So it needs to be touching the wrong side of the fabric, and then behind that one is where we'll place our 100% cotton batting. So that's the sandwich you want to make. And that's going to be for the underside. And then you have two pieces that are mirror image for your lining pieces. And those are all the pieces that we need to make the body of our oven mitt. So now we can head over to the sewing machine. First, I'll line up my two lining pieces, pretty sides touching. You can place pins around. You're going to sew all the way around the entire thing, and I want you to leave an opening somewhere here along this longer straight edge. So if you want, take something to mark your fabrics with so you remember not to sew in this area. And leave yourself about a 4-inch chunk from here to here that remains unstitched. So you'll want to start sewing here and just come straight down and then stop. And then you'll start back here and backstitch and work your way around the rest of it, ending here. You don't want to sew across the bottom because that's where you need to put in your hand through. So set that one aside and we'll take it to the machine. And then for these ones too, so you want to layer it up in the sandwich that you need. You can also use your temporary spray adhesive to help things hold a little bit better. Or sometimes I just like to take a couple of clips and clip these together and then go to the sewing machine, and with a basting stitch we're going to sew all the way around. That's going to make it a little easier to hold so many bulky layers together. So I will do that. Once these 3 layers have been sewn together, this was sprayed together so it's holding pretty easily. Then we'll go back and put these pretty sides touching, and we're going to sew all the way around, starting on this end and ending here. We'll set this aside for now. And then let's baste these guys individually first. Now let's baste all these layers together, sewing about 1/8 of an inch in, starting at the bottom and working my way around the entire mitt. When you baste your layers together, you'll find that things will shift and move around on you. So what I like to do is go ahead and trim flush to the fabric edge. That will make it easier to line everything up when we go to construct the top and the bottom part of the oven mitt. So just trim away anything that's sticking out. Now let's baste our patchwork panel to the 100% cotton batting piece that we cut to match the size. If you use the temporary spray adhesive, you don't have to do this step, but I like to do it just as an added security step so I make sure nothing lifts on me when we get to this next step. So now place the top and the bottom of your oven mitts, pretty sides touching. And we're going to sew these together using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, leaving this bottom part open. Now our exterior has been sewn together and so has the lining piece. This next step is the most important part so that you end up with nice looking oven mitt. So we're going to come in here and trim all this excess. Usually around curves, I like to clip with my pinking shears, but as you probably imagine, there's way too much bulk here and most pinking shears are not going to easily cut through this. This is really hard on my hand. So what I like to do is just trim it close. If you have a lot of bulk, you can also clip actual curves into the seam allowance with some sharp scissors like this to help release some of that added bulk. Okay, so it's up to you. So just clip your curves somehow, trim them narrower just to reduce some of that bulk, especially along the curve lines. So all of this here, all of this around the thumb, all the way down to where it starts to straighten off. And then the most important section is going to be right here. So remember I kept telling you to sew in a loop-de-loop section like this. We're going to come in here and trim most of this away. You can also cut clips into this curve really, really close. The closer you get to your stitch line, the neater the finish is going to be in the finished oven mitt. So I trim away the excess, leave a little, and then still cut some little tight snips without cutting into my actual stitch line. And now on the lining pieces, because it's just 2 pieces of fabric, the pinking shears definitely come in handy here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pink the seam allowances around the curves to reduce bulk. And here, clip, just cut in all the way to the seam line. Looks good. Now let's grab the lining piece, flip it right side out, and give it a press. Now we're going to take this lining piece, I insert my hand, bring it over to the exterior piece, and we want to match them up for sewing pretty sides together. So the pretty side is on the outside here, and if I slip this in here, then it's going to be pretty side to the pretty side of the exterior side of the oven mitt. So just slip your hand in there, and you're going to match up the side seams of the lining with the side seams of the exterior. Match it up here. Now we get to sew this shut, so let's go over to the sewing machine and using about 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and matching these edges up as we sew, we're going to stitch right around the opening. Now reach into the lining, find your opening, and then reach in through the opening and pull the whole exterior out through there. Now make sure that you have this nice open curve here and that the fabric doesn't look like it's puckering. If it is, you'll have to flip it back out and cut away more of the seam allowance along that curved line, or make some additional clips. That means that there's still too much fabric there in the seam allowance that's not allowing it to turn out like this. But this is what you're aiming for, okay? So I push everything out. Then we'll come here to the lining. We can seal up this opening just by turning under the raw edges. And you can hand stitch this, but it's going to be on the inside. So I'll just do a quick sew right here, 1/8 of an inch in from the seam allowance. Then take your lining and push it into the oven mitt. Now the last step is to top stitch right around the wrist opening here to keep the lining fabric from creeping out on you, because it is just floating loose in there. So push everything in and then top stitch about 1/4 of an inch away from this outer edge. One final press and your oven mitt is complete. And there you have it. That's my way of making some patchwork oven mitts. Obviously, there's tons of different ways to do it, but hopefully my free downloadable pattern and this step-by-step free video tutorial gives you a good starting point so you can branch out and start making them your own. I hope you enjoyed this technique of using some fun interfacing, and remember that I've included a link for you below on where you can purchase it. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, share it with some crafty friends, and remember to post pictures on different social media sites and tag me if you decide to give this project a try. Thanks again for watching this video, and remember, this was day 5 of my 12 days of last-minute DIY gifts, so that means I'll be back tomorrow with another free video tutorial. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.